The pallet jack wasn't supposed to fail. That's what I kept thinking in the half second before my back hit the concrete floor of the Walmart stockroom, before the pain exploded up my spine like lightning, before everything went white and then dark and then just pain. Endless pain. The pallet jack wasn't supposed to fail. But it did, because someone hadn't maintained it, because someone had ignored the maintenance log, because someone had decided that fixing a piece of equipment cost more than the risk of not fixing it. That someone was Walmart. And on March 7th, 2018, at 11:43 p.m. during my regular night shift, that decision cost me my ability to walk without pain, my health insurance coverage, and nearly my ability to provide for my daughter. But 4 years later, it also cost them $2.3 million. My name is Teresa Owens. I'm 42 years old. I've worked retail since I was 16, and for the past 8 years before the accident, I'd been working night shifts at the Walmart Supercenter in Bakersfield, California. Stocking shelves, unloading trucks, inventory management. I made $13.75 an hour. I had a 7-year-old daughter named Maya. Her father had left before she turned 2, and it had been just the two of us ever since, living in a one-bedroom apartment on the east side of town, where the rent was cheap and the walls were thin enough to hear our neighbor's television through the drywall. Night shift paid an extra $1 an hour. That dollar mattered. It was the difference between making rent on time or asking for an extension. It was the difference between name brand cereal or store brand. It was Maya's dance classes, which cost $60 a month but made her happier than anything else in her life. So I worked nights, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 4 days a week. I'd come home, sleep until 2, pick Maya up from school, spend the afternoon with her, make dinner, tuck her into bed at 8:30, sleep another 90 minutes, and go back to work. It was exhausting, but it was survival, and I was good at surviving. The stockroom where I worked was a maze of industrial shelving, pallets stacked 15 feet high, and equipment that was supposed to make the job easier: pallet jacks, hand trucks, box cutters, step stools. The pallet jack I'd been assigned that night was number 17. I remember because the handle was wrapped in duct tape where the rubber grip had worn away, and someone had written 17 on the tape in black marker. The hydraulic lift was slow. You'd have to pump the handle 8 or 10 times to raise a pallet that should have taken 3 pumps. But it worked, mostly. I'd loaded the pallet with boxes of breakfast cereal, 48 boxes, probably 300 pounds total. I pumped the handle, raised the pallet 6 inches off the ground, and started pulling it toward the sales floor. The stockroom floor was concrete, smooth but stained with years of spills and scuffs. The pallet jack rolled fine for about 20 feet, then I heard a pop. Metal on metal, sharp and wrong. The handle jerked in my hands. The hydraulic lift gave out instantly, and 300 pounds of cereal dropped straight down. The pallet hit the ground, tilted, and the momentum sent the whole load tipping toward me. I tried to step back. Didn't move fast enough. The pallet caught my shin, knocked my legs out from under me, and I went down hard. My back slammed into the concrete, and the impact drove the air out of my lungs. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, just lay there staring at the fluorescent lights overhead, trying to understand what had happened. The pain came about 5 seconds later, not sharp, blunt and deep, like someone had driven a spike through my lower back and into the floor. I tried to roll over, couldn't. Tried to call out, could barely whisper. Marcus, one of the other night stalkers, found me about 3 minutes later. He radioed for help, and the overnight manager, a guy named Derek Paulson, who always looked exhausted and annoyed, came back to the stockroom. Derek stood over me, arms crossed, and said, "Can you move?" "I don't know," I managed. "My back." "Did you lift with your legs?" I stared at him. The pallet jack broke. The lift gave out. Derek looked at the pallet jack, at the cereal boxes scattered across the floor, and sighed. "Okay, let's get you up." "I don't think I should move." "Teresa, I can't call an ambulance for every bump and bruise. We need to clear this aisle. Can you stand?" I could. Barely. Marcus helped me up, and the pain when I straightened was so intense I thought I might pass out. But I stood, and Derek seemed to take that as evidence I was fine. "Take 15 minutes, he said. "Get some water. If you're still hurting after that, we'll see about sending you home early." I spent those 15 minutes in the break room, sitting on a plastic chair, crying as quietly as I could because I didn't want anyone to see. The pain wasn't getting better. It was getting worse, radiating from my lower back down my left leg, a burning numbness that made my foot feel like it wasn't attached to my body anymore. I told Derek I needed to go to the hospital. He told me I could leave, but if I did, it would be an unexcused absence unless I could provide a doctor's note within 24 hours. And if I filed a workers' comp claim, there'd be an investigation, paperwork, interviews. He made it sound like a threat, like I'd be causing problems by being hurt. I drove myself to the ER at Kern Medical Center, waited 4 hours to be seen. The doctor ordered x-rays, diagnosed a severe lumbar strain and possible herniated disc, prescribed pain medication and muscle relaxers, and told me to follow up with a specialist. The bill was $2,800. I had insurance through Walmart, but the deductible was $3,000, which meant I was paying out of pocket. I filed the workers' comp claim the next day, submitted the ER paperwork, the doctor's note, a written statement about the pallet jack failure. Walmart's HR department, a woman named Jennifer, who I'd never met in person, who worked out of some regional office, called me 3 days later and told me my claim was under review. In the meantime, I was placed on unpaid leave until I could provide medical clearance to return to work. Unpaid leave. I had $400 in my checking account. Rent was due in 2 weeks. I called Jennifer back. I can't afford unpaid leave. I need to work. I understand, Ms. Owens, but company policy requires medical clearance for any employee recovering from a workplace injury. Once your doctor clears you, you can return to your regular schedule. How long does the review take? Typically 4 to 6 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks without income. I felt something crack open inside my chest, a desperation that tasted like metal. I have a daughter. I can't go 6 weeks without pay. I'm sorry, Ms. Owens. I don't make the policy. I went back to the doctor 2 weeks later, told him I needed clearance to return to work. He looked at me like I was insane. Ms. Owens, you have a herniated L4-L5 disc. You need physical therapy, possibly surgery. You cannot do manual labor right now. I don't have a choice. Yes, you do. You file for disability. You pursue workers' compensation. I filed. They're reviewing it. That could take months. I need to work now. He refused to clear me. I left his office, sat in my car in the parking lot, and tried to figure out how to survive. I called my landlord, explained the situation, begged for an extension on rent. He gave me 2 weeks. I applied for emergency food assistance, started selling things, my old laptop, Maya's baby clothes that I'd been keeping for sentimental reasons, jewelry I'd inherited from my grandmother. It wasn't enough. Maya asked me one night why I was walking funny. She was 7, small for her age, with dark hair she wore in 2 braids and her father's brown eyes that I tried not to resent. Did you hurt yourself, Mama? Just a little, I said. At work. It'll get better. Does it hurt a lot? Sometimes. She hugged me, carefully, and I tried not to cry in front of her. The workers' comp claim was denied 6 weeks later. The reason given, insufficient evidence that the equipment failure was the cause of my injury. According to Walmart's incident report, I had improperly operated the pallet jack, leading to a preventable accident. Derek Paulson had signed the report. So had Jennifer from HR. Neither of them had been there when it happened. I appealed. The appeal was denied. I was told I could pursue further action through the state labor board or through private legal counsel, but that Walmart considered the matter closed. I couldn't afford a lawyer. I could barely afford groceries. I went back to work in May, 3 months after the injury, without medical clearance, because I didn't have a choice. The pain was constant now, a dull ache that spiked into agony whenever I bent or lifted or stood for too long. I took ibuprofen like candy, wore a back brace I bought at CVS for $30, tried to hide how much I was hurting because I couldn't afford to lose this job. Derek noticed, though. He started assigning me to lighter duties, working the register instead of stocking, folding clothes in the apparel section instead of unloading trucks. It felt like mercy at first. Then I realized my hours were being cut. Fewer shifts, shorter shifts. By July, I was down to 20 hours a week. I confronted Derek in his office, a cramped room that smelled like burnt coffee and stale air. Why are my hours being cut? He didn't look up from his computer. You can't do the work anymore, Teresa. I'm trying to accommodate you, but we need people who can stock. I can stock. I've been doing it. You're slow. You take breaks. You can't lift anything over 30 pounds without wincing. Because I'm injured. Because of faulty equipment. According to the incident report, the equipment was fine. You made a mistake. That's not what happened. Derek finally looked at me. Take it up with corporate if you want, but I can't give you full hours when you can't do the full job. I left his office shaking. Not with fear, with rage. Clean, burning rage. That night, I took my break at 2 a.m. like always. Went out the back entrance to the loading dock where we were allowed to smoke, even though I didn't smoke. I just needed air, needed space. The dumpsters were out there, big industrial bins that got emptied twice a week. One of them was overflowing, the lid propped open, paper spilling out. I don't know what made me look. Curiosity, maybe? Boredom? But I walked over to the dumpster and saw the papers were incident reports, dozens of them, printed on Walmart letterhead, dated over the past 2 years, bundled with rubber bands. I pulled out a stack, started reading. Incident report from November 2016. Employee injured when pallet jack, number 17 hydraulic system failed. Minor laceration to hand. No workers' comp claim filed. Incident report from March 2017. Employee reported pallet jack, number 17 making unusual noises. Hydraulic lift slow to respond. Maintenance requested. Status. Pending. Incident report from August 2017. Employee injured when pallet jack number 17 dropped load unexpectedly. Bruised foot. No workers' comp claim. Filed. There were 11 reports total, all involving the same pallet jack, all documenting failures, malfunctions, injuries, all marked with the same maintenance status, pending. They'd known. For 2 years, they'd known the equipment was faulty, and they'd done nothing, and now they were throwing away the evidence. I took the entire stack, stuffed it into my backpack, my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip the papers. I didn't know what I was going to do with them. I just knew I couldn't let them disappear. The next day, I called every personal injury lawyer in Bakersfield. Most of them wouldn't take the call. The ones who did listen said the same thing. Workers' comp cases are difficult, especially against large corporations, especially when the claim has already been denied. One lawyer, a man named Richard Vasquez, who sounded about 100 years old and exhausted with the legal system, said he'd meet with me if I could bring documentation. I brought the incident reports. Richard's office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. The waiting room had 3 plastic chairs and a coffee maker that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the 90s. Richard himself was in his late 60s. Gray hair, rumpled suit, thick glasses. He looked like someone who'd stopped caring about appearances a long time ago and just focused on the work. I showed him the reports. He read every single one slowly, making notes in a legal pad, with handwriting so messy I couldn't decipher it. When he finished, he looked up at me. "Where did you get these?" "The dumpster behind the store." "They were throwing them away?" "Yes." He leaned back in his chair, tapped his pen against the legal pad. "Ms. Owens, do you know what this is?" "Evidence that they knew the equipment was dangerous." "It's more than that. This is evidence of systematic negligence. They documented the problem repeatedly and chose not to fix it. That's not just negligence. That's willful misconduct. And willful misconduct means we're not limited to workers' comp. We can sue for personal injury. We can go after punitive damages. What does that mean? It means if we win, you're not getting your medical bills paid. You're getting a settlement, possibly a big one. How big? Richard smiled, and it was the first time I'd seen him look anything other than tired. Depends on how good their lawyers are, but given what you've shown me, 7 figures, maybe more. I didn't believe him. Not really. 7 figures sounded like fantasy, like something that happened to other people in news stories. But Richard took the case on contingency. No payment unless we won, so I had nothing to lose. The lawsuit was filed in September 2018. Walmart's legal response came 6 weeks later, a motion to dismiss, arguing that I'd already pursued workers' comp and couldn't now sue for personal injury. Richard filed a counter motion, arguing that Walmart's destruction of evidence and fraudulent incident reporting invalidated the workers' comp process. The judge denied Walmart's motion to dismiss. The case was going to trial. That's when Walmart's lawyers started calling. The first offer came in December, $50,000 to settle with a non-disclosure agreement. I'd sign away my right to talk about the case, the injury, anything related to Walmart. Richard advised me to reject it. I did. The second offer came in February 2019, $120,000. Richard said it was insulting. I rejected it again. The third offer came in May, $250,000. Richard looked at me across his desk, the same desk piled with files and coffee-stained papers, and said, "This is a life-changing amount of money. I need you to think carefully before you reject it." "What do you think I should do?" "I think they're scared. I think they know we have them, and they're trying to make you go away quietly. I think if we go to trial, we could get significantly more, but trials are risky. Juries are unpredictable. If we lose, you walk away with nothing." "What are the chances we lose?" "With the evidence we have, less than 20%, but it's not zero." I thought about Maya, about the apartment with the thin walls, about the back brace I wore every day and the pain medication I couldn't always afford, about Derek Paulson and Jennifer from HR and every person at Walmart who'd looked at me like I was a problem to be managed rather than a person who'd been hurt. "I want to go to trial," I said. Richard nodded. "Okay, then we go to trial." The trial began on September 16th, 2019, 18 months after the injury. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, wood-paneled and fluorescent lit, with a jury box holding 12 people who would decide what my pain was worth. Walmart sent a team of 4 lawyers, all in expensive suits, all carrying briefcases that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Richard showed up in the same rumpled suit he'd worn to every meeting, carrying a leather bag held together with duct tape. The trial lasted 6 days. Walmart's lawyers argued that I'd been negligent, that I'd failed to inspect the equipment before use, that my injury was the result of my own carelessness. They brought in an expert witness, a safety consultant who'd never set foot in a Walmart, who testified that the pallet jack had been adequately maintained and that any failure was unforeseeable. Richard destroyed him on cross-examination, showed him the incident reports, asked him to explain how 11 documented failures over 2 years constituted adequate maintenance. The consultant stammered, backtracked, finally admitted he'd only reviewed Walmart's official maintenance logs, which showed regular inspections and repairs that apparently had never actually happened. Then Richard called me to the stand. I testified for 4 hours, described the accident in detail, described the pain, the medical bills, the denied workers' comp claim, the cut hours. I brought the back brace, showed the jury. Brought my prescription bottles, showed the jury how many painkillers I'd been taking just to function. I told them about Maya, about dance classes I could no longer afford, about the nights I'd lie awake trying to figure out how to keep us housed and fed. Walmart's lead attorney, a woman named Diane Richter with steel gray hair and a voice like a scalpel, cross-examined me. She was brutal, asked if I'd been tired the night of the accident, asked if I'd been distracted, asked if I'd been taking care of my health or if my weight might have contributed to the injury. Every question designed to make me look careless, sloppy, somehow responsible for my own suffering. I answered every question, stayed calm, didn't cry even though I wanted to. Then came the moment that changed everything. Diane Richter called Walmart's regional manager to the stand. His name was Thomas Keller, a man in his 50s who wore a suit that fit perfectly and spoke in the smooth, empty language of corporate training. Richard had warned me this would happen. Walmart would send someone senior to express regret, to humanize the company, to tell the jury they took employee safety seriously. Thomas testified for 20 minutes about Walmart's commitment to safety, their robust equipment maintenance program, their comprehensive workers' comp system. He said my case was an unfortunate outlier, that they'd reviewed their procedures and implemented additional safeguards to prevent similar incidents. Then Richard stood up for cross-examination. "Mr. Keller, how many stores are in your region?" 37. "And how many employees work in those stores?" "Approximately 4,200. "Do you know Ms. Owens?" Thomas glanced at me. "I know of her situation, yes. But do you know her? Have you met her?" "No." "Have you visited the Bakersfield store where she worked?" "Not personally, no." "So when you testified about this case being an unfortunate outlier, you were speaking about someone you've never met, in a store you've never visited, regarding an incident you didn't witness?" "I've reviewed the documentation." "The documentation that was in a dumpster?" Thomas's face tightened. "I wasn't aware. Mr. Keller, you're here representing Walmart, correct? Speaking on their behalf?" "Yes." "And yet you can't tell this jury the name of the woman whose life your company's negligence destroyed?" "The plaintiff? Her name is Teresa Owens." Can you say it, please? Thomas looked at the judge as if expecting an objection. None came. He looked back at Richard. Ms. Owens. Say her full name. Teresa Owens. And then, I don't know what came over me. I stood up. Richard hadn't asked me to. The judge hadn't called on me. But I stood up and I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, my name is Teresa Owens. I'm 40 years old. I have a daughter named Maya who is 8 years old. I worked for your company for 8 years. I made $13.75 an hour. I was injured because you decided fixing a piece of equipment cost more than my safety. And you're sitting here in your expensive suit calling me the plaintiff like I'm not a real person. Say my name. Remember it. The courtroom went silent. The judge looked like she might hold me in contempt. But she didn't. She just said quietly, Ms. Owens, please sit down. I sat. My hands were shaking. Richard looked at me, and I couldn't read his expression. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. When they came back, the forewoman read the verdict. Liable for negligence, liable for willful misconduct, damages awarded to the plaintiff in the amount of $2,300,000, $2.3 million. I didn't react immediately. Couldn't. The number was too big, too impossible. I just sat there while Richard squeezed my shoulder and the judge thanked the jury, and Walmart's lawyers packed up their briefcases with tight, angry faces. Outside the courthouse, Richard explained how it would work. Walmart would appeal, but the verdict was solid. We'd probably have to negotiate a lower settlement, but we'd still get a significant payout. After legal fees and taxes, I'd walk away with around $1.4 million, more money than I'd earn in 20 years at Walmart. You did it, Richard said. You stood up to them, and you won. I drove home in my 15-year-old Honda, the one with the broken air conditioning and the check engine light that had been on for 6 months, parked in front of my apartment building with the cracked stucco and the broken security gate. Walked up to the second floor, unlocked the door, and found Maya asleep on the couch, my neighbor Rosa sitting in the kitchen, keeping watch like she'd done 100 times before. How did it go? Rosa whispered. I couldn't speak. I just started crying. Rosa hugged me while I sobbed into her shoulder, and I couldn't explain that they weren't sad tears. They were relief. They were exhaustion. They were the release of 4 years of pain and fear and shame, all pouring out at once. The settlement was finalized 6 months later. Walmart paid $1.8 million, less than the jury awarded, but more than Richard had expected after appeal negotiations. After his fees and taxes, I received $1.2 million. I paid off my medical bills, all of them. The ER visit, the specialists, the physical therapy I'd been putting off because I couldn't afford it. I paid off my car. I moved Maya and me into a 2-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood with a pool and a playground. I enrolled her in dance classes again, the good ones, at the studio she'd always dreamed of attending. I set up a college fund that would cover 4 years of tuition anywhere she wanted to go. And I quit Walmart. Walked in during the day shift, found Derek Paulson, and handed him a typed resignation letter. He read it, looked up at me, and said, So you got your payout. I got justice. Same thing, right? No, I said. It's not. I started working part-time at a local library. It paid less, but it didn't hurt my back. I could be home when Maya got out of school. I could take her to her dance recitals and school plays, and all the things I'd been missing while working nights at Walmart. The pain never fully went away. I still have flare-ups. Still take medication on bad days. Still can't lift anything heavy without consequences. But I can manage it now. I can afford the care I need. People ask me sometimes if it was worth it. 4 years of pain, of fighting, of barely surviving. And I tell them yes, not because of the money, though the money changed my life, but because I refused to disappear. I refused to be forgotten. I refused to let a corporation treat me like I was disposable. I made them say my name. I made them see me. And I won. Thomas Keller, Walmart's regional manager, never apologized. Neither did Derek Paulson or Jennifer from HR. Walmart issued a statement saying they'd reviewed their safety protocols and remained committed to employee welfare. They didn't admit wrongdoing. They didn't change the way they operate. But for 11 hours, a jury of 12 people looked at the evidence and decided that my life mattered, that my pain was real, that a corporation couldn't just throw away documents and lie on incident reports and get away with it. That was worth everything. Maya is 11 now. She still dances. She's talented, really talented, and she talks about maybe becoming a professional dancer or a choreographer. She doesn't remember much about the years when we were struggling, when I was working nights and walking funny and trying to hide how scared I was. But sometimes she'll ask me about the trial, about standing up in court and making that man say my name. "Were you scared, Mama?" she asked once. "Terrified," I said. "But you did it anyway." "Yes." "That's brave." I don't know if it was brave. It might have just been desperation, or anger, or the simple refusal to accept that someone else got to decide I didn't matter. But whatever it was, it worked. A grocery store clerk from Bakersfield, California took on Walmart and won $2.3 million. Not because I was special or smart or had some secret advantage, but because I refused to let them erase me. And because on March 7th, 2018, at 11:43 p.m., a pallet jack that never should have failed did fail, and instead of accepting it as just another accident, just another cost of being poor and powerless, I picked up the evidence from a dumpster and fought back. My name is Teresa Owens. Remember it. If you've ever felt invisible, disposable, or powerless against a system designed to grind you down, this one's for you. Sometimes the fight isn't about winning, it's about refusing to disappear. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear about your own battles, big or small, in the comments. And if you'd like more stories about ordinary people who stood up and fought back, a like or subscribe helps me keep sharing them. Thank you for reading and for believing that every person's name deserves to be said out loud.